Oh, sorry, sure. And then my kid says, I said it was Stan, and then he said, I'm calling him Stanley. And he's like, get it? Stan. I'm like, yeah, that's probably why they're called Stan. Yeah. But Alyssa didn't know that, and when I told her that, she's like, oh, that's how they're called Stan. It's like, yeah, the 3-year-old has to point it out.
The only thing is that when you end the lecture is to click stop sharing.
Otherwise, it's going to keep recording when I'm playing my games, not doing my work.
So right now it's actually recording. And then the other thing is just not closing these Chrome windows that are open.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So I'm gonna be leaving half an hour.
Okay.
Mainly because I messed up I keep taking classes from 9 to 12, so I scheduled the meeting for 12. So
okay. It's okay. You're just missing the end of correlation. It's not hard. You'll be able to figure. Pardon me? No, it does not.
Class is missed. Just like a business, I learned a business degree in like 1 minute. Supply low, supply. Supply and demand. There's your business degree.
Oh, don't talk about it. I'm teaching that this term. It's awful. I try to be excited about it for the undergrads, but sweet Jesus, I just like find it so like I'm teaching. Well, it's not so bad. I'm teaching how to do compound interest. That's not so bad.
This time you should have them all by stocks.
Have what?
Have them all by stocks. See if you can make a profit. That's your assignment.
We can make a profit. That could be.
To make a profit, you get the money. And you get a cut.
Okay, it's not my eyes. It really is out of focus. And statistics. And explore. Oh, I should be able to do a guest. Oh, I am on as a guest. Okay. This is not my work computer. Because work doesn't give me a good enough computer. I'm good now. I didn't think I had internet capabilities.
Oh, wrong answer to
Right, last year my laptop was way too slow and it bothered me. All right. Now, so this is being lecture captured or the screen. Is my voice too?
No.
No, oh good, because it sounds awful and I swear and tell inappropriate jokes. So that's why I usually have never done lecture capture. So anyway, the stuff that has come out of my mouth at undergrads, I feel embarrassed about, but cold medicine really I don't have a filter, and then the cold medicine and lack of sleep medicine, I have no filter at all. It just all comes out. So today we are learning about exploring the data and correlations for your first assignment. I also want to go over the assignments for the journal article critique. So if you go to journal critique and critique 1, you are seeing my screen, which does not necessarily look like yours. Please note, disregard the date, and I'm not sure. I'm going to download this actually. Where did I put it? There we go. And sorry, I don't have this in a better format. So, as you will see, is this a... Sorry, this is not it. Okay, there we go. So anyway, you can read this on your own, but there are 4 articles on D12 that you can choose to critique. I have them in sort of different areas, so it doesn't matter which one. For these ones, I've chosen them so that because I want everyone to be doing the same. I'm looking for specific things. For the other journal article critiques, you'll be able to choose your own articles as well. So read your article, obviously. Single-spaced, 1 page, and it's bullets and sentence format, okay? So I'm not looking for full. The point of this is not to focus on writing, but to focus on the critique, the use of terminology here. That's what I'll be looking at. Then the next one, we're kind of looking at more about terminology, and your third critique is about the writing, and you put it all together. So I'm not saying to make it have proper spelling and stuff, but it's bullet point. You should have citations and page reference. I'd be expected that I would see some of the course readings. You might find other articles. Textbooks are fine. In stats and methodology, textbooks are the main source usually, not journal articles. And you're just going to make sure that you save. You'll see I have this on everything. All of my assignments, you save it always last name underscore your first name and then the assignment. And that's so that I don't have, hope everyone else will save their assignment as assignment 1. And all 10 of you will have the same name. That's what happens. That's the worst in HKR 2000. Has anyone ever TA'd that? Yes, they don't listen. You have 130 students, and they all have reflective activity. That's what or reflective paper, or whatever it is called, portfolio. That class I just about. This is total aside, but there's one assignment in that course you have to write an autobiographical statement, and it's just to learn about writing. There's no point. The topic is about themselves so that they can start the paper. And when it says write so many pages, have an introduction, a conclusion, and 3 pages of text or something. Anyway, I started getting the messages. How many paragraphs is this? What do you mean? How many paragraphs? And like I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I started emailing back stuff like that. And then I finally get someone, and they're like, how many paragraphs? We learned a 5-paragraph essay. So how many paragraphs then do you make that for 3 pages? And I was like, what? Anyway, so finally I had to I phoned the writing center. Anyway, and they actually were submitting the assignments with labels in brackets. Paragraph 1, introduction. Paragraph 2, content. Paragraph 1. All these were anyway. So I had to write a whole thing saying, okay, everything you learn in high school, just kind of leave it away now. This is university. We don't write 5-paragraph essays. We write an introduction, a conclusion, and the number of content paragraphs depends on what you're writing about and how long your paper is supposed to be. And we don't label them. And and that a paragraph has to be at least 3 sentences, and you can't have a whole. So some of them would hand it a 2-page paragraph in order to make it 5 paragraphs, right? So it was quite humorous. Anyway, I understood. Well, I guess I felt bad for humanity and the education system at the time. But anyway, so The focus should be a general critique. It could be stuff like the logic of the article. It could be you're not expected to provide in-depth statistical analysis whatsoever at this point. However, as we're learning today, it's important to look at the explore your data and look at normality and that sort of thing. So you could mention some of that. Did they talk about the assumptions of the test that they're doing? Last class, we talked about methodology a lot, so you're going to be looking at a methodological issue specifically, measurement. Do the authors define their variables? Do they explain how the variables are measured? Do they provide some information about reliability and validity? And do you agree with the measures chosen? Yes or no. Maybe there was something that they could have added to it. Sampling technique. What sampling technique did they use? Now, I'll tell you right now, hardly any of the papers actually state the sampling technique. So you can figure it out from the study, though, right? So most of them are going to probably be purposeful or a convenient sample. Can anyone please remind us what's the difference between purposeful and convenient that we learned last week?
You do kind of just pick up anyone that's the most convenient.
Yeah.
Purposefully, you kind of have a purpose going.
Yeah. It does sound, yeah. There's a reason. There's some sort of reason for selecting the people. It's not just where I always think of convenient sampling as high school or as psychology classes, students. But in most of us in this field, we do a lot of convenient sampling, obviously in HKR, but we do a lot of purposeful, for example, if it's an elite athlete or etc. And as I will keep saying over and over again, a critique is always strengthened when you provide citations to back up your statements. You've got the readings that you've got in D12 at minimum, and you can refer to the textbook. I'd like you to, and have proper citations. I will be looking at your referencing style as well. Reminder, I use APA. I don't really care what you use, but just be consistent and tell me what you use. I shouldn't see 5 different styles all in one thing. And obviously I'm looking a lot about research terminology. You should be using the terms, the specific terms of the course to explain and elaborate on things, okay? So, and make sure that for your statements, it's always important to say not only what it is, but the why. Not just what is wrong, what is a limitation, but why is it a limitation? And ideally, you would then also state, if you can think of something, how would that be rectified? How would you address? What should the authors really have done? As I say here, writing style will not be evaluated. But if you have major, I added if you have major typos, because I think I had one year I had a group, I had someone handed in who really took writing style, wasn't going to be evaluated to heart. I think it looked like he had done it, like written the paper in a closet or something. Couldn't see. There are guiding questions at the back here that you can help. I mean, these are basic things that you can think about. You don't need to answer all these questions, and all these questions do also help you with the other critiques. Questions or comments? Okay.
This is due next week, right?
Correct. Oh, I don't know when it, I just said don't look at that, at what's on the sheet. Okay. I did not update I'm never putting dates again on actual instructions, because then you have to keep revising them. It's easier just to have it on the D12.
D12 says it's due on the 6th. Is it due on the 6th or the 7th?
What is the 6th?
It's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It would be due on the 7th then. Correct. Sorry. Oh no, because this is due you were supposed to hand these in before class. That's why. I need these, all the assignments are mostly due, and I want to be able to read, I want to quickly look at your assignment before class next week, because we'll have a little bit of a discussion and I can bring in some of the points you make into the discussion. So I'm not grading them yet, but I want to be able to read them before class. That's why it's due on the 5th. It's the only day, it's the only assignment that is due on a Tuesday. Every other assignment is due on Wednesdays. I was like, thinking I was like, actually, I'm not dumb and crazy. There was a reason. There was a reason for that. So, you guys have now fiddled around with SPSS a little bit. Everyone's got it. It's all good. Okay. I told you, of course, who forgot about installing it until last night on my personal computer, and I had a terrible time. But I found out why, just by the way, in case this ever happens to you. When I was downloading the zip, like I couldn't find the ISO file. Like there wasn't one when I downloaded it, but I could see it in the Google Drive. And then I realized what was happening was I have McAfee on security, thing. It was flagging that one file and it wasn't downloading it. So I had to actually just go onto the Google Drive and download it directly and say, please ignore, yes, I want to download it. But it was very good. I've never seen before where you download a whole zip file and it would not actually download all the files that were actually in the folder. It's very weird. So it took me a while to figure it out. Very easy to fix, but not something I would have thought about. So when you have your data, it's very important that you really get to know your data, exploring the data, and as I say, making friends with your data. Why? One of the reasons to explore data is obviously that parametric tests, which follow the normal distribution, are based on certain assumptions. So you have to check whether or not your data is actually parametric. If not, there are other tests, of course, that you can use. There's non-parametric tests. We are not really going into a lot of that in this course. However, there's a whole chapter on them in the textbook, and you can read about them. So you need to make sure you know the data. So a lot of assumptions then is that the rationale behind hypothesis testing relies on normally distributed populations. So the logic behind, if this assumption is not met, then the logic behind the hypothesis testing is flawed. So you have to check whether your data is normally distributed. This is, you guys have seen this, the normal Gaussian distribution. And you'll see on, I can't remember, I think I have it under this lecture. There's a chapter from a textbook about the history of this. Exciting read, for sure. Actually, I read it. These are things that we give each other at Christmas in my family. It's very, not very geeky, really geeky. So obviously it's a bell-shaped. You've got the majority of the scores in the middle, and obviously I'm not sure, this is all based on Pascal's triangle, which you might have learned in grade 7. So we can also have data that isn't, though, following normal distribution. So we have skewness. Skewness is obviously lack of symmetry, and it can be, skewness can be positive or negative, depending on how the distribution looks. When I was taking my first stats class, it was for someone who was from China, and the way they pronounced the skewness made class left because we said they would say it was positively screwed instead of skewed and negatively screwed. And anyway, and I remember like finally I was like, oh, skewed, yeah, okay.
On that note, I was marking stuff yesterday, and I think somebody plagiarized because the one person had like such and such screw the data, the other one had such and such screw the data.
Screw the
In
data.
both spots.
Oh, that's how you cut the plagiarizing from the screw.
From the screw.
That's hilarious.
I read that one first, and I'm like, that's so weird, can't be used. And I read the next one, I'm like, oh. Okay.
There, yeah. Yeah. When you copy someone's work, at least fix the typos. You know, post it.
Well, you just change the skew to screw. Like, that's all they done.
That's all they did.
Yeah.
Oh.
The rest was the same, but they changed skew to skew.
You guys know that you can compare documents in Word and just make sure this is what so you take your go into Word, go into review, compare, and then you can click on compare two documents and you can merge them or create a new file. So what I do is as an example, like for your drafts, or I do this even with like thesis and stuff. So I open up the new one, I compare it to your draft, and then I can see all of the changes. And this is also how you can, as a TA, a useful tool for catching plagiarism, because if you're suspected, you don't have to read it, you can just totally compare, and if you don't see any track changes, that means they're the same documents. So it's really easy. And that's how I catch credit students too, by the way, just so you know. So yes, skewness is what this is. Okay, so when we have, if it's 0 when you don't have any skewness, 0 skewness. If the mean is greater than the mode, it's positively skewed. Notice for people always mess this up. I don't know why. Positively skewed means the data is clustered near the axis. It's quite easy. Negatively skewed is when it's clustered not on the axis, down there, over there. So you have, and here I would say, this is a positively skewed distribution, negatively skewed. It's important to use these words when you're writing statistics because they provide the reader with a visual. I know exactly what it means when, I don't need to see your distribution when you can just say it's positively skewed. I know exactly what your distribution must look like. In your papers for this assignment, you will be writing all this. Oh, I should point out, all the things we're learning today are things you look at, and I'm going to make you write them, and I make grad students write them, but like in my thesis. But in a real journal article, you don't really put up, stuff. This stuff you're supposed to be doing, and you just report that you've looked at these things. But no journal article, no editor wants to hear about all your skews and stuff. So. Then you have kurtosis, is another way of describing what the data looks like. So kurtosis is the amount of peakness, that how much is the distribution been smushed and popping up. So, and it's normal. It can be platykurtic, means that it's more flat. Think of the word plateau. Platykurtic, it's like a plateau of in geology. Leptikurtic is very pointy. Lepti. You have to leap over the distribution. Okay? I don't know if that's why they called it that, but this is the way that I remembered these things in undergrad, and it's stuck in my head. Here, we have two distributions. They both have the same mean. Both of these samples have a mean of 50. One has a very large standard deviation, 25. It's much farther spread out. And the other has a very small standard deviation. It's closer to the point. And this, I think, emphasizes why it's important to state to the reader not just your average, but you must explain to them the standard deviation because it provides you with a picture of the spread of the data. It is actually against best practices to not report the standard deviation with the, I mean, every time you report a mean, you should have a standard deviation and a standard error associated with it. We're going to be speaking more about these assumptions later, but I'm just introducing them to you. When we have other assumptions of parametric tests, if you have two independent groups, you're doing an analysis of variance, and we have to make sure that homogeneity of variance between it has been not violated. And when we're looking at within subjects designs or repeated measures, the assumption is sphericity. So we'll be learning more about those later. This is totally undergrad silly, but another assumption is that it's continuous data. It can't be categorical. Parametric tests can't deal with categories. They have to be continuous variables, or an SPSS, a scale variable. And this is what I want to emphasize here. So, if your research, this is back to how it links to design of a study. If your research question requires you to use a parametric test to actually answer the research question, then you better be collecting your data at a scale level and not as categories. So, for example, if you were really interested in about the effect of age on something, well, I shouldn't be then measuring age through age categories. I should be asking them their birth dates, or I'm not going to be able to do the parametric test that I need. I'm not actually going to be answering my research question. Are we missing anybody? No. 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. Okay. This is like the smallest class I've had in a long time. So it's nice. Actually, 20 a couple of years ago was a little much. All right. Independence is also an assumption, which means that data from one participant should be independent of another. Now, that's something technically, then you could, in your research design, you could have data that is not independent, that has to do with the fact that maybe your participants spoke to each other, maybe they, this is never going to happen, but let's say there was a couple and they were both in a study together, a drug study, and one was in the placebo and one was in the placebo control group and one was in the drug group. They wouldn't be independent, as an example, if they mixed up their medication and the one took the placebo, Anyway, you should never mix up meds. Yeah, so that would be an example. It wouldn't be independent. Obviously, very exaggerated, and that would never happen. But unfortunately, you should know, by the way, in drug studies, you can't totally trust them because a lot of people volunteer for the pharmaceutical companies. And there's actually now a psychological disorder that is addiction to research studies. I might have it. But I only mess up air miles. Anyway, and also people get money off them. So there's people who are full-time participants. That is their job. This is mostly in the States, of course. And people have died because they're in one study on the drugs, they lie and pretend that they're not in that study and they go in the other study. And obviously they're mixing the drugs and that sort of thing. But I mean, you're making a lot of, you're making thousands of dollars so on these things. I mean, I think of, I remember one of the first kin studies I did in undergrad, I did a biopsy study. Why? Like, I would never let someone like put a needle like that in me, because I got $200, right? Why not? For the greater good of science. So, kind of silly, but this is an example. If I was doing like, this is actually something that can happen in St. John's very easily, by the way, if you're doing applied research. So I might have been studying older adults, and I've got them doing water exercises and such, following them. And I've got people in the control group who are just being normal. Well, if she says, hey, Betty, see my great water exercises, I'm going to show them to you. Come on over. And then we have lack of independence, though. Okay? Silly examples, but you get the point. So, when you guys are blabbing at each other about results downstairs in the lab, you're ruining the integrity of the independence of the data. Remember that. Your responsibility to maintain the integrity of the data. Should be like gluten. All right. Oh, not independent. Now, in repeated measures, it's very different. Independence is violated in repeated measures because, obviously, we'll come Stan. Stan here, his results, or what he does at time 1, at T1, is obviously, what he does at T2 is dependent on how he was at T1. All of his behaviors are not independent of each other. We have independence between the people, but not within the people. So that's not independent. But this is independent. Okay? Now, this is totally a bit of an aside, and I don't want to, I want to point out that independence between subjects, or within subjects, is actually an assumption of regression, okay? All of regression, you have to have independent. You don't use repeated measures data in regression. It has to be independent. However, what are we always doing? I see in Dwayne and Kevin's work is always reporting about these slopes. Technically speaking, the regression slopes that are being published are not really correct because they are using data that is violating independence, and you have to use something totally different. And that's what that really awesome cool set's thing that's never going to get published. I think we're on our 3rd. I don't know, Kevin's getting mad. I saw smoke actually. So. Anyway. Oh yeah, sorry. I've got great graphics here. So within subjects is not dependent. Okay. I'm now going to show you on D2L under exploring the data. You see a handout. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to hand these out. I have correlation and explore. So these are my interpreting the output slides. These are the only handouts that I do. I will always print out and bring to class so that you can make notes. These are your Bible. This is your Bible for the assignments. It's your Bible for your thesis. As an example, Natasha. What? Evans Natasha. Buckle. Oh, I think it's button. Sorry. No. Yes, that's it. Natasha Buckle. Natasha Buckle. She's doing medicine now. Anyway, she must be doing her master's thesis, or I don't know what she's doing. Anyway, but she emails me and says, please tell me all about this thing for the repeated measures. And 5 minutes later, she emails me back and says, never mind, I just looked on your handout, which I should have done to begin with. So you make sure that you download all of these files that are on D2L so that you have them. Here you will see a data set. There's information about a data set. And we are going to download the data set, Caregiver Dataset Explorer. By the way, sorry, this is in my view, so there's stuff on there that you don't see all of it. I have to. On D2L, you can make it so that students don't see everything. I used to, stats assignment 1 used to be using this data set. So I do have all the data set information on here, but I'm not going to go over that because you don't really need it for the assignment. But if you're interested, and by the way, this is potentially a data set that you could use for the assignment if you wanted to do methodologies, if you want to do the third option. So I'm just going to show you what a data set looks like. So you'll see in exercise physiology, data sets are long and skinny. Because you've got 6 participants and they go on forever. So it's like, there's the first few rows and it goes on and on. But most people use SPSS obviously for larger data sets. Why isn't that just opening? Open. There. Okay, so this was my dissertation data. And I didn't have full, like this was on a big team of people, so it's not like I had full, it's not just my work or anything, I should say. Just so that you can understand what this is very quickly, you have ID. In your assignment you had to do, you always need to have an ID affiliated with the person. When you get the consent forms, you put an ID, you give them a code, right? Like number, it doesn't matter whatever number, you could give them a letter, whatever it is. Then you make sure that you have that in locked cabinet, and here you then put just the codes. I see way too often, and it's really my colleagues' fault, I guess, anyway, but people are collecting data with putting people's names on the Excel sheets. No. Like, I can look at exactly someone, I mean, look how small the place we are. I see data set and it says, Colin. I wonder which Colin it was that did this, or, like, when it's all of us doing the same stuff over and over, don't be putting people's names. It also is going to bias you. In statistics, you can be biased. I keep saying this. So you have to take all the names out so that you don't see that stuff either. You might look and like, oh, his data is a little off. Oh, that's because he went out drinking that night and no wonder it was off. So, stuff like that. You might think about these things and not think about how, be critical in the context of the research. We have also then the, obviously, caregiver, we got age, okay? So, and I told you, it's month, day, and year. How am I going to figure out age? I simply would have to take the year it is today and subtract the year of their birth, correct? We also ask them like relationship to the care recipient, etc. Do you have dementia? Yes or no? Now, just as a reminder, why did I not use 1 and 2? For yes and no, why did I use a 0 and a 1 for a binary variable?
Because it's either yes or it's not yes.
Yeah, binary is means like you are it or you are not it. There is no you are white or you are the absence of white. That's how. So it's yes, no. So when we ask people for gender, as an example, and you say male or female, you're not really asking them, are you male or female? You're asking them whatever your 1 is. So I, of course, ask people, are you female? I put 1 as female, right? I'm a woman, and I'm going to do that. 0 would be the male. Most people, because of tradition, the 1 is the male. But you don't have to do that. Just going to say. I just I heard I don't know what it was. Oh, I know. It was I was listening to about getting women in the tech world, and anyway, there's some sort of tech. I didn't quite get it, but a techathon. I don't know. Anyway, people go in and make technology for 36 hours without sleeping, and anyway, and they called it I forget what it was, but it was for women and non-binary individuals was the slogan. But that was great. Non-binary. And marital status, etc., education. And then I'm just pointing out what I looked at here. I had activity restriction. So these are 16 items. You don't really need to understand this totally, but I have caring, how restricted are you because of your caregiving role for caring for yourself, others, household chores, hobbies, recreation, blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We're going to look a little bit about that and depression. So I used the Centers of Disease Control scale, which has 20 items. And anyway, what I'm wanting to show you is notice, so this was done over 15 years ago. I had to think about that. Can I understand my data set when I open this up?
Probably.
No, I totally can. It's beautifully coded. That's why you have good data. That's why you have to do this. The reason for creating a very good variable view is because anyone else you give this file to should be able to know what you've done. You should also be able to open it up in 10 years and understand it. At least a bit, you might have to read some things to remind yourself. But, and this is important because data, you might want to share your data. Nowadays, people are more and more putting data up onto sharing sites, for others to look at. You can do secondary data and stuff later. And I'm going to give an example of why, when all these things are things that I know because of lessons I've learned in life as a researcher. I was doing my PhD, I had a TA thing, or a research assistant, I can't remember. Anyway, one of my profs basically said I was given data that they had collected 20 years ago, 10, I don't know what it was. And they had items. They knew that they had measured self-esteem, but they didn't know which scale they had used or anything about it. And there was no words. So based on looking at the numbers in SPSS, how many items there was, I then looked up every single self-esteem scale that has been published and deduced which one it might be because of how the values were, etc. I'm not, I guess, what those, but anyway, a lot of work. And if they had just put a little word there in the variable spot, that would have been prevented. So that was, profs not taking the time to code properly. You're going to learn this in your career. the person, your coding self, the ability to document what you're doing is your friend. So as an example, even for courses, like I might, after each course, I write everything I have to fix and change, and then when I'm having a freak out thinking, oh, I don't have time to do this, I open up my file. Oh, dear myself from last year, thank you for writing everything. It's all to do. I got exactly what I need to do. You have to document everything with research too. So you'll see, I'll show you some examples later, but like when I'm doing data analysis, I'm documenting in a Word document, step by step, kind of what I'm doing, cutting and pasting, so that I know that I can figure it out later if I need to. And also I can use all that documentation for later as well. This is also important in case someone else is going to take your data set. So in the real world, like I know this from I learned a lot about documentation from my husband, is he would be in, working in insurance and all these things. And they would document everything because the next person who might be in that position or the next, like they had to know exactly what they did. And the more it was documented, then the less there is a problem with transition between staff and people. So as an example, I now, if I'm doing something, I document it. Now it's helped me because now, as an example, if I have a grad student who's going to do it, I don't have to sit with them and explain it all. I can just hand them my document file and say, do this on your data. Oh, great, thank you. It's better than me actually explaining it to them. Sorry, you're going to see my bum a lot. So I did this with time 1, time 2, and time 3. So you'll see in this data set, you notice how it goes. It looks like all of a sudden it switches to 2s. All of a sudden we have caregiver age 2. That's time 2. All you do for time 2 stuff is, you've added 2 to it. It's easy. Then I have time 3 data. Now I have a question. You notice that for the sociodemographics, I asked them their age or whatever, but you'll notice that not all the same are repeated because obviously you don't have to ask people each year the same things. What's your religion or what's your race? It's not going to change from the year before. Nowadays you got to ask gender each time, no, because I can't, and it's also perceived. It's a percent. I mean, you have sex and you have gender; they're different. So, the very first thing that you should do in your data is to get to know your data set. So, to do this, you want to clean your data. Pardon me. So what we're going to look at is we're developing a research question. You guys are going to be doing this too for your assignment. So we're going to look at one of them has to be a composite score, meaning a composite score is when you add up scores to create, an index. And we're going to be looking at activity restriction and depression. So specifically, we're looking at activity restriction in sports. So that's just one item. And how is that associated with depression? So depression, if you recall, it was measured with 20 items. Therefore, to create a depression score for time 1, we need to add up those 20 items together. But we have to clean our data. Now, in exercise physiology, you guys use Excel first because the Doppelhofer machines poop it out into the Excel. Okay, I don't know anything what I'm talking about, obviously. And I don't actually never seen one of Kevin's, but I've seen lots of Dave's or Dwayne's data sets, and he likes them. He puts them all in Excel. I can see it's all lovely, and but it's not how SPSS does it at all. So it's a big pain. I'm not sure why he does it. It seems like a lot of steps. Like, why not just stick it into SPSS to begin with, but not my business. But if you could in my world, I could have data errors because of not coding something correctly, data entry errors, like especially if you're coding by hand. Nowadays, people, even with SurveyMonkey and all these online platforms, you don't really do that. It just downloads right into Excel for you or SPSS, but by hand. And with exercise phys, a common mistake might be you might notice like weirdo data that could might indicate an error in measurement at the time. You might have cut and pasted it things wrong. For each time that your hand touches the number to get it into the SPSS, there's greater chance for error, right, in transferring it. So you need to get to know your data by cleaning your data. So first what we're going to do is to run, oh, sorry, and why do we do this? So I told you that for my PhD, I thought I had cleaned all the data, but I missed something. And I had done all my analysis, like there was a lot of going on, and all of a sudden I realized that I had a whole bunch of zeros in my data that I shouldn't have had. Something wasn't coded correct. I had just spent like 2 months of data analysis. So I cried and cried and cried. And anyway, but I had good documentation, so it only took me a week to redo my analysis once I fixed the errors. Okay, that's what I'm linking. This is why you must clean your data. You must run the frequencies to see what it looks like, to see if there's anything weird. You never know what it could be. So we're going to go to analyze descriptive statistics and frequencies. And I'm going to put caregiver. I'm just going to put a bunch of stuff in. You don't need. I'll look at the these. Oh, I want to show you something. Pause. Sorry. Do you see how these are the words right now and not the variable names? I don't like that. I don't think that way. I don't think in getting ready for a bath or whatever the word is. I think ARS 102, like the variable name is what I want to see because I know that and it's easier. So if you're like me and you don't like it that way, you can switch this in the view. It's very easy. It's going to say cancel for a second. You can go to view, edit, options. And in here, you can play around with lots of different types of things. But here you can see, do you want to display the labels or display names? So labels would be like taking a bath. The name is ARS 102. Notice I could make the file to be by file, so that's the order in which I have put the variables into SPSS, or I could make it alphabetical. Like, it's up to you. I like it by how I have it in the file. And say apply. In the viewer, I also changed this as well. Or wait, where am I? Output. What comes out in the output of the tables, I also don't want just the labels. I like to have both. I like to have the variable name and the value label. So here you can just change names and labels. I just do, oh, you don't have to do that pivot one, but apply. Okay. By the way, it should now be this should now be you never have to change this again. And like when you open up SPSS, it should always be that it's your option now if you've changed it. So now, analyze frequencies. See, personally, like, I don't know, I just find that much easier. Also, SPSS, you don't have to scroll and all this all the time. Notice if I want ARS 104, ARS, and I just typed ARS and it just jumped to it. Okay, you can do a lot with this. It does also if you want to select multiple. I noticed students click. You don't have to do that. You know how you can select a whole bunch of things by Control Shift. You know, and you scroll a whole bunch. You can do that in SPSS as well. So all those little shortcuts. So anyway, I'm doing. So notice I'm doing it right now. I'm shortcutting this. I'm holding down my control keys, or Control Shift, I guess. I then want my ARS items. I want specifically only ARS 107 because that's the sports. And I want my depression ones, which is CS. Is it CS? CSTD. That's the Center for Disease Control Depression Scale, CSD. And I'm going to select all 20 of them. Shove them over. Now, do not do this next step that I'm about to do. I'm just going to show you how you can document the easiest in SPSS. Okay, document, document, document. So, if you've learned in your SPSS, there's 3 different types of SPSS files. You have your SPV file, which is the actual data file. You have an SPO file, which is the output file. And then you have something else, another S one. I can't remember what the syntax file is actually called at the moment, what the ending is. We have your syntax file. So you're going to see what a syntax file. I can paste this into my syntax file. So don't do this. Notice, now this is a syntax file. It pasted it. It says what data set, says exactly what I've done. And by the way, then if I wanted to redo that analysis again, I don't have to go back into SPSS and do all this clicky stuff with my variables. I can go into syntax. So by the way, back a long time, back in ancient time, Babylonian, there wasn't drop-down menus. And syntax was how we use SPSS. I was not one of these people though. I'm also post-historic. But my mentors were from that prehistoric era, and so they learned all about SPSS they did all their analysis by physically typing everything in the syntax. Okay, super cool stuff you can do in syntax that you cannot do with the drop-down menus. Personally, I believe that the state of statistics went down with drop-down menus. Like nowadays anyone can run SPSS. I can make my son do it. Like he can run data if I showed him. So there's no, and if you ever notice, what are the most commonly reported statistics when people use SPSS? The default options of SPSS, because people don't change the buttons because they don't know what they're doing. So it's always what the default button is. So in a way, people were better at statistics when they physically, were typing it. So, but the syntax can also be a way of recording things. So I personally paste each thing I do into my syntax file. And I want to point out, you can make notes in it, like with stars. So I'm like cleaning data. Okay, and then I got a little note about it. Also, when your prof says to you, what the F did you do with this? How did you come up with these numbers? All you gotta do is send them your data file and send them your syntax file and say, here you go. Like the syntax file, I can see exactly what the students did. I can see what the mistake is going to be. I can't see that as much with all the drop-down menus, right? You don't see that. So now I can actually copy this and run it instead of using the drop-down. Now, what if I you know, so it'd be very, you can see how it'd be very easy to, you know, to keep that. So when we clean data, all we do is quickly look for weirdos. I'm gonna do it really quickly because I'm used, and I can run through, by the way, I would have done every single variable to clean. I would have it probably took me 1 day to just clean, like 24 hours just to clean this data set, but it's got 10,000 variables. So, think about, I don't want to think about Daniel's data. Anyway, I have some actually on this computer, but I'm not gonna. You know, they're like each participant is like a terabyte? I want to say tetrabyte. Sounds cooler. It's a terabyte though, isn't it? What is it?
That's good.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
What's after? Okay.
Yeah.
I always call it a tetra gigs. Sounds better. Yeah. So I mean, cleaning that stuff. Oh. But they don't do it like this by hand. It's not like that. So I could quickly look in here. I see this is the year people were born, and I could see things. And you'll notice in your handout, I have this shown. I've got a weirdo. I've got someone who was born in 1998. At the very bottom, 98. It's the year they were born. Well, that can't be right. So what do? Well, your data is precious. You don't want errors in your data. So now all I have to do is I go to find the participant name. It is case 123. I would go into my files. I would find the survey 1023. I would look up what their year was. I would see, oh, it was an error in data entry, or I would find out that the person made a mistake. Maybe they were 98, not they were born in 1998. But I would then have to find that person. So to find your data, to find your errors, you simply, here I'm in variable view. Oops. Sorry. I hate this mouse. Okay. I am clicking on this and it will take me, notice it takes you right then to the data. And I can simply highlight this, Control F, just like you do with find and replace for normal. Control F, I then find this 98, locate the person, find it, okay, there they are. I would go find out what the case is, and I have to now do something with this. Ideally, I would go and find what the correct data was. Some people here lie and make up something. But if you don't know, you should then put that as missing data, right? So I would change that to be a 999. Right? You'll see I would keep going. Now you guys, again, you have your values here so you can quickly look. And I know that you guys are doing this. You would be like reading this really quickly, but when you've done it a while, all I do is like quickly skim and my eye can just see if there's a mistake. I don't know, it's trained. So I don't see anything weird here. I'm just going around. No. Oh, here's weird. Okay, my scale was 0 to 5, or sorry, 0 to 4. And in this case, I have a 5. So that's an error in my data. I shouldn't, that scale goes to 0 to 4. I shouldn't have that 5 in there. So that is, I would fix the error for case 152. And in this case, so here, Control F, I find where's my 5. There it is. And I'm gonna make, we don't know what it is, so I'll say it's 999. See if there's any, there shouldn't be any others. Oh, there is, a couple of them. 999. Pardon me? Oh, it's not the one that it is. That's ADL. Thank you, Emily. Good at paying attention. Speaking of this, another tip here. Whenever you're I always save my file as a new name each time I'm going to do something major to it. Okay? So I would save this file. I would call this raw data, or I call it dirty data. Okay? And then when we finish cleaning this, I would save this same file, but I'm going to call it clean data or something like that. That way, if you make a mistake, and by the way, it's really easy, your cat can just walk off on your keyboard and delete variables. Like I've seen it happen, really. So you want to always be saving. That's also why it's important to back up your files. In today's day and age, if you say that your data is gone, it's almost just as bad as saying like you're dying, in my opinion. It's you should be able to, you need to back things up. I had a friend of mine, he was doing his master's, his computer crashed, he had all of his thesis, all of his data, he was about to submit his thesis, was on only that laptop. It was going to cost him $10,000 to recover the files, so he couldn't do it. So he didn't finish his master's. Back up your files. I have mine, I mean, obviously cyberspace, you stick your files on your grandma's computer. You stick them, I mean, well, you're not really supposed to do this because it's data, but without anyone's names on it, data. So, and I think, I remember my thesis, I had mine in various countries, and, you know, the grandma one's probably the safest, like, she doesn't even know how to delete, you know, so.
The dishwasher.
You had to clean it? Yeah. When I was a kid, like people laundered money and all that, like I actually thought they were like washing the money. Like for a long time, I thought that's what, like, I didn't understand that it had to do with more to do with covering it up, I guess. That's not it either. I'm way. Anyway, I'm not going to bother, but there's only one of them. There it is. Okay, there it is. So I'm going to say 999. Okay? And those errors are really easy. It's super easy with your hand to put in a 5 instead of a 4. Very easy. That's why when you're doing any data entry, be focused. I personally talk to myself a lot because I find it easier. And again, a mistake I've made, you have to be focused. Data entry is very boring, but you actually have to be quite focused. So it's not something you do while you're watching a baseball game at home. Like you have to be in the zone. Okay, so I've changed that. So you'll see we'd keep going and we would find a whole bunch of, I'm not going to keep going through this, but we would find all these different mistakes and you would clean each one of them, okay? Notice I have here little tips, like so use the find and replace for cleaning your data, etc. We're now going to learn how to compute a variable. So to compute a variable, and by the way, so please don't, last year I get all these emails. No, I point out, I think we didn't actually have this class. We had 3 snow days at the beginning of the term last winter. Like I'm not exaggerating. Like every Monday, it was on Mondays. Every 6,000 was a snow day for, well, all of January. So eventually I had to say like, watch, just watch Andy's website, and I figure I have good enough notes. But I do notice that a lot of people kept asking me about computing. So if you forget a computed variable, it's right here. You don't need to email me. And you can Google it and find it also. Okay. So transform compute a variable. Your target variable, you can give it any name you want to, but it makes more sense to have it meaningful. In this case, we want depression, and it's at time 1. Right here, I can right away make sure I've got good coding for my stuff. I can put in the label. Let's say this is depression, CSD scale, time 1. It's numeric. And now there's various ways that you can do this. You could find the sum function in here. We could also, this is what a lot of people do. I can go over plus, boom, and you would keep going. Oh, I might as well, this is the oldest way. By the way, the crappy thing, pardon my French, with the sum function is when you use this sum thing, it doesn't like you. If you can't just shove all your 20 variables into it, like, so you might as well just do this plus thing rather than use the sum function, in my experience. And not very often will you be required to have to do 20 variables. For your assignment that is due next week, you must compute 1 variable. The instructions for how to compute the variable, each of the variables are all in the assignment instructions about the scale. The assignment is using it's a little pilot data that Linda Rohr and I did with older adults. So it's looking at constraints and self-efficacy to exercise and barriers and motivation. Motivation is the hardest one to compute. You'll see in the assignment. You don't have to use it though, but if you want to really learn how to compute a variable, practice the motivation one. So 11. Sorry guys, my voice is so witch-like. I sound like a little girl witch. Now, I'll show you this stuff later, but I could have done this in 2 seconds in syntax. Compute, depression, and then you just have to say, you just type it really quickly and it is done. So I just want to show you, I'm pasting this for just a moment. Why? Because, 1, I'm going to have this then in my code. Also, that took a lot of work to do that. If we now want to compute depression at time 2, what is the fastest possible way I can do it? I'm going to copy and paste that. I copy that. And then all I have to do is find and replace all of the ones, like D1 with D2. 3 seconds. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I don't see total agreement. So just as an example, you only have to do something once, and then, so I can do that. I could say find and replace, and I'm going to now replace CESD1 with CESD2. Replace all, should be 20, yeah. Okay, Bob's your uncle. Copy that back, you're done. What does that mean, Bob's your uncle? And I never use that expression. I don't know where that came out of my mouth, but anyway. Pardon me? But your uncle's name is Bob? I don't have an Uncle Bob. I had an Uncle Rob. Rob Bob. All right. So these are, I'm trying to just do little asides because it's mostly my little asides that are more important. So we've cleaned our data. We have computed, oh, I didn't finish computing my variable though. I was going to run that. And it shows on the bottom. And now the variable should be at the very end of my data set is where it will be. Depression time 1. Okay. I want to point out with syntax, you can do a lot cooler stuff. Okay. So as an example, when you get a lot of missing data when you compute variables because SPSS wants a value for every single variable that you are computing. If a person has one missing value on any of those 20 items we just computed, we're going to get a missing value. That's a lot of data that's missing. So in research, we usually say it's okay to compute a scale as long as you have 80% of the scores, or there's different rules. You have to cite this stuff though. And also sometimes you don't care. Like I remember one was about a knowledge. I remember someone came to me and it was, doesn't matter to me. It used to be Alyssa.
Dustin?
Yes. Anyway, don't ask Dustin for the stats out there. Just want to put it. Please. He didn't take it with me. Fabienne taught this course once when I was on mat leave. And no, Fabienne actually knows stats better next to, well, Daniel, but next to his phys, Fabienne knows the stats. Like he's the best. But you know Fabienne. So this is what the student said. So I have like my notes. And I handed him all my stuff, and he's like reading, and then he'd say like, tell the students about the joke. Like he would just like read exactly. Like I've got like little. I mean I don't. Yeah, but I might have little notes in there. Tell them about the joke or this. And yeah, he would just be reading it word for word. The student said it was hilarious. Anyway. So we're now going to describe, after you've computed, cleaned, you've computed, we're now going to describe the sample. And to do that, we are now simply going to run our frequencies, but just look at the descriptive statistics. So I'm going to pretend that I've rerun these frequencies after they've been cleaned. So in your assignment, I kind of remember what the descriptive statistics are, but there's examples here about how to describe. So you always should provide a description of your sample. Usually people go on too much about it, in my opinion. As an example, I don't have to say percentage of males and females. I can just say, 77% were females. The reader knows then how many males there are, right? You don't need to say it. You don't need to put it all down. I can say that the majority, almost 80% are Caucasian. I can say, obviously, most are, married or whatever. You can also add up your different things. So, for example, this is education. And education is an ordinal level variable, right? Whenever something's ordinal, meaning that it's ranking, you can add things up. So, the cumulative percentage. So, for example, here I can say, well, it looks to me like you've got, I would add all these, half the sample has at least like a college, had a college. So you can add those up. So you just say a few things. There's examples provided on the stats assignment. You'll see it's using this data, and I've just written the assignment for you, how I would expect it to look. You can then use that as an example. Don't just follow exactly what I have. After you've described your sample, you need to explore your data. So that's right, I'm gonna find this. Here. I already talked about this. Here's my example. See, I've got caregivers were female. I give an age. Notice for my age, I have a standard deviation, right? Also, I want to point this out. This is a bit of an aside. I have this on here, but decimal places is a point of issue for some people. I have different people care about different things. In most journal articles, you'll see people don't tend to use more than 3 decimal places. Okay, but it depends on the journal. It's your journal and your field that usually dictates what it is. In this course, you're following this rule, my rules, though. Okay, which is that I think, regardless of journal, what it should be. So usually you look at what the level of measurement is. I'm not going to write this out loud. For example, when I'm asking age, how many decimal places am I asking? What is your age?
0.
0. Well, there's none, right? Yeah. Because I'm just saying, I'm not asking them to be, only my father would say that I was 41.7 or something. My dad doesn't even ask for year, age, nearest birth date. That's what he uses. Because that's what they use for mortality tables. Very exciting. And then you have, for your mean, generally speaking, it should be 1 more decimal place than your level of measurement. So in this case, I'm going to have the number and a 1. Standard deviation should be 2 decimal places. So here I'd have the number and 2 decimal places. Why? Well, I'm going to explain something. It's really aggravating when people measure something in a whole number, like with no decimal places, and they report it at 3 decimal places. Why do they report 3 decimal places? Because that's the default message. You can change that, by the way. If you're measuring something as a whole number, you can't be 3 decimal places precise. That's ridiculous. That's like saying I've measured something in meters and I'm going to report you the millimeters of it. It doesn't work. So you have to think about how precise did you measure something. Now, in exercise phys, like EMG and all that stuff, you've got, it's like, I don't know how many decimal places come out. Looks like 100 to me, I'm not sure. And you narrow it down usually to 3 decimal places. So that's fine. But then if you're reporting the whole number as 3 decimal places, what would my mean have to be then? 4 decimal places. And my standard deviation would need to be 5. In most of our data sets that we are using in this class, it's not EMG data, so it's just made up things. It's almost all whole numbers, so you're just, in general, just use 1 decimal place for the mean in this course and 2 for the standard deviation, and you'll be fine. But I want to explain why. Then we have to discuss the normality of the data and identify and discuss outliers. There are 3 ways that we do this. First, we look at our histograms. We also look at skewness and kurtosis. And then lastly, we look at Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. Formally, we will now call this the KS test from now on. A little bit of history. You'll notice this in stats all the time. There's two names hyphenated. Like, they're not people like me that were from, got married in the 90s and thought it was cool to hyphenate names, okay? I didn't want to hyphenate my name, but there was a battle. I lost, kind of. What? Smirnoff, yeah. I call this the Russian vodka test, is actually the name I use, but I stopped using that word Russian vodka test because I heard people like Fabienne, other people would start to use it because the grad students used it, and I found that embarrassing that we were like, what people think of us, we're like, you do the Russian vodka test? Anyway, so I thought, and I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, like my husband, like Matt he would roll, he doesn't like that I use these, he thinks it belittles the field of statistics. But I mean, who wants to say that name? I mean, that's why people call me LA, not Lex Atkinson. So anyway, but the reason that they're double, this guy invented it. At the same time, this guy invented it. And then they're like, oh, we both invented this. Instead of us, killing each other, we will make the test to be the same name. This is very common in statistics. It's very weird. What is the statistical probability of two people on different sides of the world coming up with the same thing? Pretty cool. It's because there's a statistical god, they're releasing the information. So, you always first plot a histogram. You look for outliers, any weirdos that you might have that might inflate the standard deviation. Oh, sorry, I guess I should do this for you. So we're going to now analyze. We're going to go to explore. I'm not sure what I have in the instructions here, but explore is the easiest. It doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to put then, I have to put activity restriction at time 7 and my depression at time 1. You'll see statistics. It's hard for you guys to see the descriptive outliers. You want to click on that outliers box. And by the way, this is all in here. If you keep opening this, you'll see there's I have exactly what bloody boxes you have to click. Okay? People think that I've developed these at first to be nice, but it was actually to prevent people from bothering me. And luckily, it ends up being good for both, right? So you're welcome to always bother me. I just would rather that you don't bug me about these which boxes you should check. I shouldn't say that you can't bother me. Plots, you'll see here you can get your histograms or a stem and leaf. I like a histogram. Where am I? Sorry, I'm missing something. Oh, pardon me, there it is. So under plots, you want normality plots with tests. That will give you the Russian vodka test. Okay, normality plots. Okay. And here we go. So, tells me how many people. By the way, I just want to point this as a total aside. This is time 1 data. I had 300 people in the data. At time 3, there was only 80. I think it was close to. So it was there was over a 60% attrition rate over 2 years. So I mean, this data was collected this isn't when it was, but 2005 was time 1, 2006 was time 2, 2007. So it's really not even 3 years. It's really 2. And That's how many of the of people died. So when you're working with older adults, that's why it's very important to oversample. That's why it's really important that we got at least 300 the first time, knowing that that many people would die. Also, I mean, that was also data in itself, because we were able to report to the national health people about big sort of mortality rates for caregivers. Like, it's the best data that anyone had. Isn't that sad? I think it's sad. Poor Leo. Do you know poor Leo, our janitor? I guess his brother just died. I knew that. But anyway, I hadn't seen him. And so I gave him a hug. And I thought he was going to cry. And anyway, and his brother died and was underneath his kitchen table 2 days before I found out. I don't think so. He died of himself like that. Understand? Isn't that sad? Anyway. No wonder he said. So here you'll see you've got all your descriptives, and that's a nice plot. So I'm first going to look at the histogram. You'll see here. Why doesn't it have the plot on it?
I think that you missed checking out the stem leaf.
Okay. It doesn't really matter. You'll see it on here. So here, so don't freak, you don't have to have that little line on there. It doesn't matter. But here, I can say, I look at this, and I want you in your assignment to say some words about it. So to me, this looks somewhat normally distributed. It might have a bit of a positive skew to the weight right here. And obviously, these are Likert scales here, okay? It's not really the same as what most data would look like. But it has a positive skew because the mode is a 1 on a 5-point scale. In contrast, if we look at the depression, it shows that this is very positively skewed. It's very much clumped at that end, okay? That's actually good. That means that the people were depressed. I mean, yeah. So, we're glad. And what this also shows, I would look up on the scale, and on the Centers of Disease Control, it says, I think it's a score of 16 and higher, maybe indicates depression. So, or sorry, I forget what the scale is. I'm sorry, obviously not that. I think it might. So you could look at the number, and I can see then there's certainly outliers here. I have some people who are at the other end of the scale who obviously are reporting a lot of depressive symptoms. But that's how you look at the histogram. We now can actually find a number for if it is skewed or pertused, okay? So we can actually know if it's statistically or not. You guys know, oh, sorry. I see it. We know that this, technically, this is how the normal distribution is, and that you guys probably, at the time, you had to use this to figure out Z scores. You're converting standard deviations to Z. So we know then that anything that is above a 2 is on the tails of the normal distribution. Therefore, they are statistically significant. So when you standardize something, generally speaking, if the absolute value is greater than 2, it means that it is statistically significant. That's kind of a rule of thumb. You could do that yourself with our Z scores. And obviously, you figure out your Z score. What is math doing? Well, you look up in the table and you find if that Z, what's the critical value for that. So these are, just for memorizing, these are your important Z scores to always know. roughly around 2 means that 95% lie between that. So that means that anything above a 2, an absolute value of 2, is probably statistically significant. If it's above a 2.6, it's even more. If you've got 3s, woo-woo, that's like kind of a big flag that something's going on, right? 99.9% confident that that's a weirdo. So you have to look at the skewness then. All you do is to get Z skewness, is you take your skewness score and divide it by its standard error. Very easy. And you'll see, and then you look to see if it's above 1.96. Same with kurtosis, same thing. I get a standardized kurtosis score by taking the kurtosed value, or divide it by its standard error. So here, as an example, it's the table from SPSS. We have our statistic and its standard error. All I have to do then is take this, divide it by that. Personally, what I do is I copy and paste this into Excel, quickly do the thingy, Bob's your uncle, or Rob's your uncle, and you're done. This is the biggest mistake that you will do in this assignment, is that you won't use the standardized score to tell me about the skewness and kurtosis. Okay, remember you have to divide it.
So with kurtosis, is if the value is 0, then it's perfectly normal.
Correct. Then we look at box plots. You get these lovely things in SPSS when we clicked on outliers. These are, we'll talk more about this. And SPSS lovely sticks all the weirdos up for you with dots, okay? And the values that are assigned to their case number. So I know that case 229 is a weirdo. I would like you to look at something. This is the exact same picture as the normal distribution I just showed you. Wait, I'm just showing you. Where to go? Okay, you see this? Picture it in your head. This is simply me. I am now standing over top of my normal distribution and I'm looking down like this at it instead of like this. Okay? So here, there's my weirdos. That's all these graphs are. They're just different orientations of distributions, okay? So you're just looking down at it this way. That's your box plot. You can see where everything's clumped. You can see that's the tail. This is long and skinny because it's wisping out. Sorry, it's not like I'm doing a drama play. Anyway, where here it's all, clumped up together. Here, I have no weirdos. Perfectly, looks like almost perfect normal distribution, although not really. And I didn't, when you only have one, it's a Likert scale. It's got 5 points. It's not going to be that great anyway. So again, you use the Z-scores to figure out if you have statistically significant outliers. So in your data, in your analysis, in your assignment, you're going to tell me if you have outliers. You're going to tell me if you have weirdos. But you also have to tell me who they are. Are they high or low on that variable? Who are they? Don't just tell me that you have outliers. What kind of outliers? In this case, there are outliers who have very high, they have severe depression, it looks like. What can you do with outliers? You can remove the case. You can transform the data. You can change the score. Don't recommend that. Okay? It's kind of fudging or fishing or lying, kind of, yeah. So, but I have to say, I can't really give an example, but I've done it, and it wasn't exactly like, sometimes it's given an estimate about what it was, I don't know. So, The histogram then tells you if it deviates from normal, but it doesn't tell you whether that oh, sorry.
Can you just go back to it, or?
Yep.
Basically, why would you not keep them there? Like, why would you, like, all those options seem to get rid of the outliers, why do you, why would you just keep them?
They're making it so it's not normally distributed and it violates all of your parametric assumptions. That's why. Also, they're not representative then of what you're looking at. Now, sometimes you actually want to look at the weirdos. They're the people. And you don't always have to cut them out. Like in this data set, I did not cut out any outliers because I was interested in depression. I'm not interested, I was interested in those people, or just on average. But you may, an outlier could also indicate something weird with the data. Think of like heart rate. Like what if you saw like this really crazy heart rate? That means that person is dead, or there was an error in the data collection. Why would you want to keep that person? Right? Because it's probably a mistake. So it totally depends on what you do with outliers totally depends on what your data is and what your purpose is, etc. But if you don't want them to affect the normal distribution, you take them out. Now I'm also talking about, Sean, with like, this has like 300 participants in it. I'm not talking about when you got 10, right? What did Jeanette call you?
Shane.
Shane. Okay. So I think she might add, yeah, she might have said that, and I didn't know who she was talking about the other day, but now I do. You have to forgive her. She's got. Wait till you have a baby. You have no idea what sleep deprivation is. I remember Jeanette last year. She came in. She's like, "Oh, I'm so tired." This is before the baby's born. I had to get up at 7 on Saturday. I went, bah! Like almost rolled on the floor. Wait till you see what's coming. I never thought in my life that I would say, "Oh, I'm okay. I got a good 3 hours of sleep." Like that was words that would come out of your mouth in the first year. It's good. That's why they boost you with hormones and make the babies so cute. Evolution. So we didn't sit on them. So, Russian vodka test, okay? This is the only way you can actually see if your data statistically deviates from normal. So it compares the scores of your sample to what another sample would be if it had the same mean as your data set and the same standard deviation. This is, you know how usually you want something to be statistically significant, right? You're like, please let that p be small. Please let that p be small. This case, you don't want it to be statistically significant. It's the opposite. This is testing the hypothesis that that it is not normally distributed. You want it to, or sorry, that it is normally. So you want it to not be statistically significant. Okay? Notice I've emphasized this. If it's non-significant, it is not significantly different from normal. Therefore, yay. Okay? All of the assumption tests are like this. You don't want them to be statistically significant. So, this is what you get when you clicked in SPSS, exploring the data. You got then the Russian. The Shapiro-Wilk test is also, if you go into field, and you want to be all fancy, technically, a lot of people recommend that you look at both Shapiro as well as Russian vodka. And if they, why? Well, if they're saying the same thing, then that's good. If one of them is very different from the other, maybe you want to investigate further. So you have your value here. Oh, and this is how you report it. The depression at time 1 was not normally distributed according to the Kolmogorov-Smirnov normality test. You have a D. By the way, Russian I mean, I sound like I've got marbles in my mouth when I try to pronounce any Russian word. But I always found it funny for such a kind of that type of language, it's kind of harsh. When you actually hear, when someone's speaking Russian, it sounds like poetry. Like it's actually quite a poetic with spitting, but notice it's a D. Notice my D is italicized. Notice I have my degrees of freedom. That's my sample size. Why do I need to put that down? Because I'm telling the reader what my, well, one, you gotta know what your degrees of freedom are. Also, I'm telling the reader what my sample size is. And making sure that they know. So I've got complete data on 143 people, only for that. And give the value, and you can just say if it is, you can put p is less than or equal to, you could put the exact p value, or you could just put an ns, like not significant. In today's world, it is much better to always report exact p values. That's more proper practice. However, you don't need to do that for assumptions like Russian vodka and all that. And what do you do? Well, usually people transform their data. So there's lots of transformations. You can take a whole class on how to deal with missing data. You could take a whole class on transformations. This is beyond the scope of this course. Luckily, you're going to find that for most of you, it's not very often that I don't see, most data is normally distributed from the grad students that I see, so you don't usually have to worry about it. The person whose data in area of research is more likely to not be normally distributed is mine, and luckily you have me, and we would fix it with transformations. I'm not even an expert on that. I have to admit, I call in the hubby on that one sometimes. So you need to also report the descriptives of your variables, mean, standard deviation, and standard error. Obviously, you find them right there on in the data set. And here I'm saying on average, caregivers were slightly restricted. Give my mean, I'm using 1 decimal place because that variable is measured as a whole number. I'm giving 2 decimal places for my standard error and standard deviation. That's something I'm looking at. Notice I have italicized M. This is important. Why is it important in statistics to italicize your whatever, so I can't think of the word. Your letters. Well, no. To show that they're a statistical symbol and not just a regular anything else, right? If I make an X, I can have an X. Well, you can't see what, you don't know. That's, X bar here. So you italicize it, and then you can see that it is. It's about in math, everything is precise that way so that you don't make mistakes. Like, you'll notice we have our 1. This is not how North Americans draw 1, but that's probably how. Then a 7, you put a dash on it so that distinguish it from the 1, right? Then they have, all your symbols are supposed to be for a reason. And even when you're drawing them, I used to think it's silly, but it's very easy to have, if I don't draw my epsilon, right, it kind of looks like I'm doing a 0 with a bar, it's very easy to get them mixed up. We're not doing this right now. I will. I'm going to tell you. I'll verbally tell you. You can explore data for 2 groups. All you have to do is, I'll show an example. So I'm going to explore the exact same data. You don't need to do this. What am I doing? Analyze, descriptives, explore. Okay, I can put in a factor list. So a factor list is like factor, any variable that we have categories. So let's say I wanted to know for people, I want to know the difference in the descriptives between the caregivers who are looking after someone with dementia and someone who without dementia. That variable was very important in my study. Dementia is really the most difficult type of person to look after is someone with severe dementia. It affects the quality of life of the person more. So I stick that in. Now I can say, okay, and now it's going to poop it all out, but it's going to give it, look, isn't that beautiful? It's 3 seconds, like it does. Anyway, now I've got have dementia or not dementia. So you can do this with males and females, active, inactive. Met VO2 max, did not, I don't know when. You know, left hand, right, left dominant, right dominant, whatever it is that you are looking at. You can find all this out in 2 seconds. Most people, what they do is they copy all this, I see this all the time, copy all the, let's say, male data in one SPSS file and the female data in the other SPSS file and run them. Holy bajolies. Anyway, you saw I just did that. What did it take? 15 seconds, right? 15 seconds with a click. Okay, we need to go on to correlations, but you guys need to move for a second or go to the bathroom. Oh. I'm gonna sit on the opposite. I'm getting all these. My husband does our washing. It's not that I can't serve him. And I've noticed, like, I often do my delicates or my nicer stuff, you know. But anyway, lately I've been busy and I've just been. So I realized there was this pile of sweater, like anything that he thought might. He has to think about it a little bit, not just shove it in. So when my parents-in-law visiting, it's like I'm getting a new work, like all these sweaters, and I'm like, I forgot about this shirt. I must have worn it in the, I don't know when I last wore this, like in the fall maybe, but months ago. Anyway, every time I think my wardrobe looks bad, I just have to go to the laundry room. Well, he's shrunk a few things too. I think he's nervous about it. Who wants money to be a personal trainer for me? No, everyone's looking down.
I was thinking, anything that adds to that.
Right. I think to find an undergrad with time. I mean, they're not a very good student. I'm not a good student.
Wait, were you being serious?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, really. Yes. You'd be good at it.
It's a little like intimidating.
Oh, I thought about that. Yeah. Maybe it is. I've tried before to find someone, but they keep, like, no one would do it. Like, James was the only one that wasn't into, like, you know, he was Emery's trainer and Heather's trainer. Doesn't look like he gets intimidated very easily, guys, but, although he broke our sweetheart's heart, so we gotta pinch him. I know. I haven't seen him since then. I'm gonna pinch him again.
Or take a flight. Where's she now? San Antonio? Boston.
Well,
Austin. Oh.
I love James. He's my favorite person. I'm still gonna be an author with other, but. I thought it was so funny. When they broke up, I knew. It was like someone had told me. No, I had told. And because she was all quiet, like every time they would see, if they ever saw me, like they would like step away. It was hilarious. Like they would try to be all professional. Sometimes like as if not everybody knows. It's hilarious. Anyway, and yeah, so I remember when it happened, I went and hugged her and she goes, "You knew?" And I'm like, "Oh," like if she was surprised I'd known that they'd been dating. I'm like, "That's hilarious." Yeah, you just happened to go to the mall together, like, and if you're getting socks at the mall with someone, like, you're probably dating. Probably. Yeah.
Is that a thing? Like, that's when you know
JD, you go get started for her.
You know it's serious when you're getting the other person socks. Like, cause you're just at the store and you're picking up socks and you're like, "Oh, there's some nice socks on sale." That's when you know when you're deeply in the relationship. But people don't do that now anyway. I realize your generation is the most generation where relationships are very weird to me. Like everything is separate. Like people date and I'm gonna give an example. Bo lives with his girlfriend, they cook separate food.
of course.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. The best part, like being in a relationship, is that it's efficient. That's the whole point of it. Social exchange theory. I mean, it's not just for, I didn't just get married because I have my laundry done and you think it cook. But you know, like, I don't, anyway, like, it's just more efficient to be a team. But that's not how that's not how the generation is. Yeah, there's not going to be 70th wedding anniversaries anymore. My grandparents were married. They had just my grandma when she died. They were 72 years married. The Queen wrote them a letter. Yeah, if you ever need this, great gift. For all the big anniversaries, you can just go, I forget what website, but anyway, you can go and you just fill out a form and it goes to the Queen and say like it's my parents' 50th anniversary or stuff like that, and the Queen sends a little bit. It looks great for the grandparents, you know. It doesn't cost anything. You just have to register. You just have to sign up, and they'll do it for any of the dominions. Like as long as you got her face on the coin, she'll write you a letter. Pardon me?
Do we have our kids on the phone?
Yes, we do.
I don't know, it's been a while since the phone.
There's just old bills around.
We have like Loon
And there's a beaver.
Beaver, yes, but that's not the Queen.
Well, oh, sorry, my joke. I love this. So I don't have.
Oh. Heads or tails?
I used to love. I need a loony and a toonie. Anyone have one? You'll have them returned. I want to third international. This is like my joke. I use that. I love the one. Holy smokers! They're pretty. I haven't seen one.
keep it in here for good luck, but.
Yeah, okay, I promise I'll return it, right? Oh, this does not work, because it doesn't have the bear. Okay, imagine it has the polar bear, okay? So like it's sort of embarrassing how we color coins. I can't find it, right? Embarrassing. So, why do we call it a loonie? Because it's got the, a loon, that's the bird, right? And then we call this a toonie, but we're gonna call it a moonie, right? Because it's the queen with a bear behind. The polar bear? A moonie. Anyway, I think it's hilarious. And then I had a second level of the joke was because they were considering a $5 coin, and that's common. Europe has a 5. They've got the 5 things. And I forget what my joke was, but I made something up that was going to be hilarious. Yeah, the moonie. Okay, no problem. Thanks for letting me know. All right, correlations. Again, I don't mind if you need to stand. Like, I would rather you stand than sleep. Or stand. I mean, I know, like, you guys were all just raring to get here. So correlations, in brief, because this is it's not too difficult. So the other part of your assignment is you're going to need to do a correlation. Correlations are not. Okay, what is a correlation? Simply a measure of a linear relationship. I mean, this is, to me, this is undergrad level things, but okay, not everyone has had this, so it's always good to go over it. A linear relationship, and you always just look, I mean, pretty easy. Kids, you always look at, if your arrows are both pointing in the same direction, it's positive. If your arrows are opposite in direction, then it's a negative relationship or inverse relationship. And obviously, it could be no correlation at all. So how do we measure relationships? Well, through covariance. When one variable deviates from the mean, we expect that the other variable should deviate from the mean in a similar way. So here we've got 5 people, and they're looking at advertisements for packets of candies, okay? What it is. Number of advertisements, and this is, for the person. So we measured how many packets of candy each person bought during the next week. And if the relationship between the number of ads viewed and the number of packets bought, I mean, you'd expect this, right? Advertisement knows this, right? Do you ever notice, you know how it's so annoying when they put the same ad one after the other? You know why they do it? Social cognitive theory. That's why, because we know that even when a person finds something annoying, the fact that you saw it, even if you hate it, you're more likely to be primed to purchase that or to do it. I hate, yeah. And they're right, because it just sticks, like even, I mean, they say that negative, false, or poor, bad advertising or negative advertising is still advertising. It's in your head. So we expect them to, I mean, in this case, we expect them to go in the same direction. But the problem is that it depends on the scale of measurement used. Okay? So what this means is that if you're measuring one thing by a certain metric and you're measuring something else by another metric, you can't compare them. In this case, number of advertisements and numbers of candies bought, well, it's number, it's a continuous, it's the same scale. But I could be As in my research, I might be using a 5-point scale for one variable. I might be using a 10-point scale for another variable. Or you're measuring one thing in its VO2 max, and the other thing is a totally different variable. They're not the same thing. You can't compare them. You cannot compare apples and oranges. The only way to compare apples and oranges is just like with z-scores. You have to standardize them. You cannot compare apples and oranges. You have to make them to be fruit so that you can look at the fruits. I do realize all my examples are a little fruity, but they will stick in your brain. So to convert a covariance into a standard set, we have to standardize it. And that is exactly what it is. A Pearson correlation is simply a standardized covariance. So the most common correlation that we use, you guys might just call them correlations, but it's actually Pearson product correlation. Pearson's just the dude that published it. So correlations can vary, or negative and +1. And there's lots of different, correlations are also a little bit of an indication of effect size. Each field has different values about what are strong effects, but standard, in here, this is by Cohen, 1963 or something like that. And they're saying that if it's a 0.1, it's a small, 0.3 is a medium, 0.5 is large. Okay? In my world, something that was a 0.5 would be like amazing to get, because people aren't as, when you're dealing with social things and you get a lot of variance in the data. In exercise physiology, you're much more likely, you would expect a 0.8. Or, you're expecting very high correlations because they're physiological in nature and they're following specific laws of nature. So they should be. I mean, gravity is very much perfectly correlated with lots of things. Why? Because it's science. It's physical science. So very easy to do one is to create a scatter plot to look at how your variables vary. So of your independent and dependent variables. And in 2 sentences, discuss that scatter plot. So I'll show you in SPSS, you simply go to, sorry guys, I didn't do this part. Graphs. Okay. Graphs, legacy dialogues. I don't know why it's called legacy dialogues. I don't even know what that word. Like it sounds like you're about to enter a cruise ship company or something. Legacy. And scatter or dot. In Spanish, the scatter plot is called a cloud diagram. Much more pretty. Sounds nicer than a scatter plot. And that's it. I'm going to define it. Obviously, you can make your X and Y axis. You guys should have, you have this in front of you, do you not? Yes? Where's mine? I just want to follow what I did. Okay. Putting the dependent in the Y, because obviously this is correlational data, so it actually doesn't matter because it's the same. Oh, I'm not picking the right one. I'm doing the same mistake. ARS 107. Okay, and you can see there's titles that you can do. I don't do all that stuff. Options, you can even display missing values. You can do all this different stuff. And you'll find, if you notice, when in publications and on all the posters you see down there, you'll notice people don't use SPSS graphs. Why? Because they're ugly looking. Excel and Corel Draw or all these other things, they make much nicer graphs. So yeah, you'll see that most people don't use these, but you need them to look at them for exploring. So I have to say now something to my prof about, this is a terrible, so because my one variable is really scale, or I mean, it's not really continuous, it's only got 5 levels. It's really more of an ordinal one because it's not computed. This is a terrible looking cloud. It's not a cloud. Normally you're going to see with your types of data, everything's going to be like actually look like a cloud. But when you do look at this, you can kind of, it gives you some idea of the type of relationship though. I mean, you can see that to me there looks like, you know, there's a little bit of, I could make a line here. I can see, generally speaking, it looks to me like the more restricted people are, the greater their depression is. But from this, I can't really tell if it's statistically significant. So obviously the only way to do that then is to do a correlation. So we're going to do a bivariate correlation. Oh, here, I'll tell you. Why do a scatter plot? First of all, it's going to tell you if there's relationship, what kind. It'll also show you correlational outliers. For example, you might see the weirdo who is not restricted in their activity and has really high depression. You can see those types of relationships. And you need to write it up. I say I did a scatter plot. I say it kind of shows there's a linear relationship, but I'm not really sure. No, it says kind of greater activity restriction, more depression. It does show outliers. There's a few people with low levels and high levels of depression. Again, I could have also looked up group differences, just like I did for Explorer. You can create scatter plots, all your graphs based on group differences or any other factor that you would like. I'm not doing this now, just showing. To be able to really use SPSS, you just need to know what the stuff it can do. That's why. So as an example, look, I made this lovely graph here, and I know you're partly it might be colorblind. It's very only when I started teaching this course did I start to realize. I didn't realize color blindness how high it is in the population. I had 3 guys in one class, this success, and they were all colorblind. So, and I have to say, so they couldn't. I don't know if you are colorblind, you don't even know right now what I'm talking about because you can't see the differences. But there's green dots and blue dots, right? So I looked up the statistics, and 3 out of 10 males are colorblind. 1 out of 10 females. But it's whether it is, a lot of people don't even know that they're colorblind because it's just like, you know, the sort of the stereotype type in a way, it's like how men don't understand the difference between colors. Well, in a way it's true. Like someone like my father, I realized he cannot tell, he just can't tell the difference between a certain type of blue and a certain type of green. It's more about a color blindness than that he doesn't know his colors. There's different types of correlations. There's bivariate. Bivariate means that you're just looking at the 2 variables. A partial correlation, this is used all the time in research, partial correlations. And what that means is that you're controlling for the effect of an additional variable. Let us think about Venn diagrams. So I have variable x. Oh, my nail was scratched. And I have z. So I'm going to pretend z is age. It doesn't really matter what it is. So a bivariate correlation is just looking at x and y. But I can do a partial correlation where I remove the variance attributed by a third variable. So let's say age. So in this case, statistically, you're taking out all of the variance of age, you're getting rid of it, and you're not looking at, so you're taking that out, and then you're only looking at the variance that is left over by your X and your Y. And that's what you hear if you read, we statistically controlled for age, or we statistically, we age-adjusted scores, or all that stuff. It's just, they're just partial correlations. So all you do is you run a bunch of partial correlations, and you save your data back into SPSS, and it removes all the variance out of the one. Now, question, is this as good as controlling it in an experimental design? Think yes? Sorry, wrong answer. It is always better to have controlled for your variables, if you can, in the design of the study, not statistically. Statistically controlling is like when you can't do the experiment, or for me, I do it all the time because I'm not doing experimental, I'm doing surveys, so I'm using big data sets. But it would have been better for you to control for age in your study. Make everyone be the same age to begin with. Then you don't have age as a factor in the experiment, rather than controlling. Now you can still do that. I mean, you can still, even if you control for age, even if you do something about age in the design of your study, you can still control for it statistically as well. So that's what so up here, so there's a whole bunch of types of correlations. They depend on what the variables are. So Pearson, notice it's a little r, is not a big R. Big R is variance explained. It's a different thing, not a correlation. Little r. The data has to be parametric. So I can only use this correlation if my data is at the scale, is a scale, continuous, and if my Russian vodka test said that I had normally distributed data. Otherwise, it's not the right correlation. So here, I said a bivariate correlation was calculated. The variables were significantly, positively, and moderately correlated. Notice I put the exact p-value. And I got this by, I didn't show you this part yet. So it's very easy, analyze. Very easy. Correlate. There's bivariate partial. So bivariate, I take my ARS 107, get my depression, and I'm just going to do all of them because there's different types. So there's your Pearson, there's Kendall, Tau, and there's a Spearmint. And you use these in different cases. I'll explain that. You can also change two-tailed or one-tailed. 10 points to anyone who can explain to me when would you use a one-tailed and when would you maybe use a two-tailed test?
Whether or not you know the direction that the outlier is probably going to be in, or
For the hypothesis, yeah. If you have a directional hypothesis. So if you don't know if your hypothesis is that if you don't know that if they should be positively related or negatively related, correlated, then you would use a two-tailed. But if you have a hypothesis, you should be using a one-tailed test. I would like to point out that this is the most common mistake I see in all research that leaves this building. People always have hypotheses, yet they're always doing two-tailed tests, or they're not actually testing the hypothesis. So why did you make one in the first place? And so when you're working with your prof, instead of just sitting there and letting that prof tell you this is what we're doing, say, hey, wait a second, we should be using a one-tailed. And they'll say, why should I listen to you? And you say, because I took this course, and guess what? Doing a one-tailed test is statistically valid, and it's going to give us greater power. Greater power means we're more likely to find an effect. So why wouldn't you want to do something that is probably going to increase the likelihood of you finding a significant result anyway? So you're going to tell your prof, yeah, we're going to use this one-tailed, and look, we're going to have even a smaller p-value day, smaller. And he's going to say, okay. And you're going to please, we'll emphasize this to them. One day, when I retire, maybe I'll have changed things, but not yet. But that's okay. So you get this kind of thing. A correlation coefficient, or R squared, is simply the amount of variability in one variable that is explained by the other. We're going to see this again when we look at regression. So what that means is if I have a correlation of 0.25, I square it, it means that 6 point only, that means activity restriction explained only 6.3% of the variance in depression. Really low. Now in my world, that's what I kind of look at, is these really sad numbers a lot. But you're dealing with is psychological things. Now, you'll find in exercise phys, you might be getting 80% of the variance explained sometimes. Now, this doesn't just tell you that maybe your study didn't really explain that much, but it also tells you, well, brother, I better be looking at other variables. If I'm only explaining that much variance, I have to do another study. I'm going to do another experiment now. What are other variables I should be adding in to help increase the, how much variance I'm explaining? So the R squared value, it also kind of tells you, hey, you need to do another study here. Find some other, you need more variables. Spearmint is used. You use it when you can have non-continuous variables. You can have ordinal or data, and it's when it's not normal. So for example, in this case, if activity restriction and depression were not normally distributed, I cannot use Pearson. Therefore, I use Spearmint. Okay? I tell the reader that. I say, I'm going to use a Spearmint correlation because my data is not normally distributed. That's a flag. So people put this kind of stuff in their descriptives, in their data, in articles. And how many times do I see people reporting Pearson correlations when their data is not normally distributed? All the time. That's the first flag. You're not doing the right descriptive statistic, so why would I bother reading the rest of the paper? So here, I'm just going to get that example. Notice I'm using a reference. Okay. Notice it's a different little, I forget what that symbol is right now. Row? I think it's row. Does anyone know?
I know it's during the row.
Oh, right. Thanks. There you go. Then you got Kendall. So that's non-parametric. It's when you've got variables at the ordinal level. So this is for doing a correlation with ranked data. It's good when you have a small data set and a lot of ranked categories. So for example, education level, income level. Kendall Tower. You actually have to do these by hand, a lot of them, but like this.
Sorry, what's the difference between Kendall B and C? Definition here.
Kendall B and C. I do not know. In like, where is this in the textbook as well?
Yeah.
Okay, I actually don't know that there's different types as well. I'm actually not sure about them. I can look at it. I can tell you though next class, or I'll email you. I'll look at what you're talking about. Point by serial is when you've got a dichotomous variable. So like a yes or no. So let's say I wanted to look at a correlation between gender and depression. And there's math that you have to do. So you could pick one of these for your correlation for your assignment, but you have to do it. You have to do it by hand. So you do a Pearson, and then I'm going to explain this. Oh, sorry, this isn't by hand. You just have to interpret. Biserial is when you've got interval ratio and a dichotomous. And a dichotomous variable that specifically is when you have a continuous variable that can be collapsed into two categories. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, instead of the variable being color, like red, blue, green, it's something like amount of physical activity. I can collapse that into being active, inactive. Some VO2 max met criteria, did not meet criteria. Like I was thinking of firefighter testing when we did that. So it's not, you can't use this for gender or for any other thing that it's not for an on-off variable. It's for a variable that you've taken that's big and you've collapsed it. You're not going to need to really do these for the assignments, but you need to know that there's all these types. You guys only thought there was Pearson. Your mind is blown with the possibility. Right? So you can recode a variable. So I could recode depression into clinical depression and not clinical. So I would take my depression, I go into recode the data. It's really fast, by the way, recoding. You know how you guys, a lot of people I've noticed like they actually replace variables by hand. You can just recode in 3 seconds. I could recode 10,000 variables if it was the same code I'm using really quickly. You don't have to do a lot of stuff by hand. As an example, Stats Canada, I don't know why, but they make all of their data 1s and 2s instead of 0s and 1s. Yes, I don't like that's what I feel like to. So you get like a data set that's like 10,000 people. And it's so big and it's all not coded how you want. Very easily, you just quickly can recode and you make all of the 2s a 0 or whatever in 3 seconds. It's recoding is your friend. I have the example here. I'm not going to show you. Just recode. You have to change your variable. And actually, I'll show you. I'm not going to do it, but I'll just show you what the box looks like. It's under transform. No, it's not. Where is it? What do I say it's under? No. Oh, there we are. So recode. I'm just making something up at the moment, just for a second. Okay. Then you have the old and new values. You have to put the old value and the new. You can make system missing be system missing. You can do ranges. So in this case, I would have done the lowest to 16 would be not depression. Anything above 16 was depression. You can rank, so you could make 3s. This is really easy. The most common reason that you guys would use this would be probably if you're taking something and collapsing people to be like active and inactive, or meeting guidelines, not meeting guidelines. You'll notice that there was 2 options here. there was recode into same variable and recode into different variable. If you're going to recode in the same variable, make sure you've saved your data somewhere because you're going to change it. So I don't recommend to the junior SPSSer to do recode into the same variable. Change the name of it and recode as a different, then you're not going to mess it up. Because it's pretty easy. Like, it's awful if you recode something and you change, like, if you make a mistake, it changes the whole thing, replaces it, and you cry. Again, I'm just telling you this because I don't know how many times I must have cried when I was learning. Like, I think a lot. My husband would say that's ridiculous. I probably am a big crier. I cry about everything, though. Happy and sad things. Remember to update your information in variable view. If you don't, as an example, if I made gender to instead of be 1s and 2s, I made them 0s and 1s, and if I switched it, then I'm only going to have value labels for like the one that's the same, not for the different ones, and you're not going to know what your data means. Oh, I see. Okay, we're not doing this. Math. You have to do math for the 1.0. It's actually not that hard, but you have to do this. I have it here in case you ever want to do one, because you have to do it by hand. I've already shown you partial correlations. All right, so on your assignment, you need to, I think you can have a read of it, by the way, but essentially, all it does is I take the same thing, it's a different data set, read the data set, and you're basically doing the exact same assignment. At the end of assignment 2, exploring the data and correlations, you will see that I have an example. It's called Angela Stats example. It's very detailed, and you can follow that along. I'm not going to consider that you're like plagiarizing my style or something. You know, this is how you learn. How did I learn? By copying and pasting the actual words in other journal articles, sticking them in mine, and then changing it to be my math and my variables. That's how you learn. Like, just, you know, you're not plagiarizing you're plagiarizing the style, not the wording. And the other reason that you need to know this is after today, for every single assignment, you are going to do this. You're going to write it all out for this assignment. But after this, step 1 of every single assignment you have in this course is explore your data. It should be your first step for all of your life. Always get to know your data and, you know, make love to your data. You gotta know it and understand it. So you will have to know how the distributions are, the averages and the ranges, so that when you see something, you can think, I know why that might be, and you can go and look. Or it's through knowing it that's when you also see mistakes, like you know, that there was errors in data collection or that sort of thing. Okay, one I have you for we'll be done. I don't mind being done early too, because I can't talk much anymore. I had one of those. Yeah, I slept in 3 different beds last night, kind of a night, so. Musical beds. Okay. Oh. I'm showing you the answers to this assignment that you handed in last week. I just have to quickly grade them, but I realized that it would save me a lot of time. Instead of typing the same thing, I could just verbally go over it because it's the same stuff for each person. So, key points that I would have been looking at is that you recognized in your data entry, the difference between the different types of missing data. So I don't care that I'm looking to see that you shouldn't just leave it as a blank. You should tell the SPSS what it means. Because different types of missing data mean different things. If someone doesn't know something, that's very different from refused to answer or I was absent at the testing protocol or whatever it is. You can, if you had missing data on someone because of some kind of testing error, well, you can ask them to come back in and retest them. If someone's because they don't want to tell you something, they refuse to give you that information, that's totally different. Also, it's beyond the scope of this course and beyond my brain. But there's all this theory around missing data. Depending on what kind of data it is, like you have to know why it is missing, and why it's missing informs you as to what type of missing data imputation you should be doing. And so right away I can see, okay, I got a bunch of missing, 777, don't know. Lose your parent, it doesn't know their kid's coach's name. And I'd be making sure that, it was complete, obviously. Common mistakes that I see here is, well, I would expect that, so I just took the labels. Obviously, the labels are directly from, I just copy and pasted that from my survey. Make it up. Now, this is the one mistake that a lot of people would do is, sorry, I can't get that. When you're setting up your data set, your file, remember that you're setting it up for any data, not the data that I gave you, okay? Which means you're supposed to be, so I would have example here. In this case, it was 1, 5, or missing. There was no don't know or refuse to answer or whatever, like that was the only option. So I just copy and pasted. And by the way, do you guys know, like all you have to do is do it once and then you just copy and paste it all the way down. For those who didn't know that, you didn't have to go into each one. You can just copy and paste. Here is not a mistake, but just pointing out some people, I haven't looked at them all. Some people might have put like what the 1 was and the 2 and the 3 and the 4 and the 5. That's not wrong, but it's a lot of goings on. You don't need to do that. Like I always just put the 1 and the 5. But again, it's not a big deal. You cut and paste. You're cutting and pasting. Then I put my missing. So personally, what I do is I just set up all my missings right away. So I think it's better to just put them all. This isn't actually what I've done, but I could have just said, if for every single variable, 77 is don't know, 99 is missing, 888 refused to answer, and I could have just put them on each one. So what my point is some of you will have done this. For coach, you will have put, let's say, don't know, maybe, but you might not have labeled missing data for variables that didn't have missing data, but that's not how it works. You don't start with your data and then set up your file. You set up your file to be able to take any possible data. So it's better just to label all of the variables as having the missing data, because you don't know which data you're having is missing to begin with. Is that clear? Do you get it? Okay, all right. So yeah, I don't go, when I'm collecting data, I don't be like, oh, I got a survey, it's got missing data. Oh, what variable is that? Oh, now I better add missing variables there. You put the missing variables in there to begin with, and then you put your data in. Okay. Are there any questions about that? Oh, sorry. All of these were basically Scales. This, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Technically, actually, ID is scale. It depends, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But the only ones that are different is gender is obviously nominal because it's a nominal variable, and coach was nominal as well. Now, do you care? Why do we care about that? Well, it helps to tell the reader. Also, it mostly doesn't matter at all, actually. But there are some times when SPSS will not run something because you're running a parametric analysis on a nominal variable. So, as an example, you're trying to run, let's say you're running a t-test, and SPSS is saying, no, you can't do this. And you're like, yes, I can. What are you doing, SPSS? It might be because you've incorrectly clicked that your variable was nominal when it's really scale, and SPSS is saying, you can't do a t-test on a nominal variable, but it's because you just had the wrong label, like you just incorrectly. So I'm gonna tell you a secret. In real life, I don't actually touch those. I just have them all with scale. I usually don't touch them at all. I mean, you can tell what it is by the values already. Any other questions? Okay, and I think that it's incorrect. Are you sure that this is due? This is not due next week. It's due in 2 weeks. Is that right? Is that correct? This one as well? Okay, this is the only time then. Okay, that's right. After this one, then it goes 2 weeks in between. So, if you have any questions, I will be here on Friday. Also, of course, it's always, remember we have class next Wednesday. Your assignment is not due until the evening, so you can always say, like, ask me all your questions after class next week. But don't save everything till last minute. Also, if one of you has a question, probably all of you do, I encourage you. I find it much better if people come in groups to ask questions too, because usually you're learning from each other, and you might all have the same question anyway. So I found that effective. Yeah, but I noticed that last year people came a lot in groups, and it was just easier. Also, you can call me. I'm often someone who knocks on the grad door in the winter to see if anyone has questions about SPSS, like stats, before I leave. You can call me. I'll come down to the grad, like, go down there. You guys are all working. That's a lot easier for me than everyone, one by one. I don't mind at all. Just come in. I never thought of that. I could just go and hang there for like an hour and do work. And if you have questions, that's a lot easier. Play my city game. My name is Adu the Impaler. Forge of Empires. I didn't know that other people would see the name. I didn't think I would ever want to play the game. And so I should have picked a better name. Adu is my family nickname. But Impaler isn't.
So this,
Now I'm going to close.
actually stop sharing.
I'm stopping sharing.
And then back to Chrome. And the next one? The one in the middle? Yes.
Oh,
That one.
do you want to
And then
close? Oh,
stop.